Hey guys, Mrs. Harbar's here. I wanted to say that I miss you and I'm sorry we can't be together in school. But my plans are I am going to set up some virtual lessons of things that we would have done during the school year, as well as some kind of other hands on things that I'm sure everyone could figure out how to do at home. So hopefully we'll have some fun with this for the next 8 weeks. All right, bezel setting. Now, most of you should have already watched these previous Edpuzzle videos on bezel setting. Some of you had started this already, some of you hadn't. I'm not sure that anyone finished. Maybe one person did. But we're going to just review this quickly. And your assignment is going to be to make some designs for some fancier pieces that you could theoretically make in the future. All right, so quick review. Materials and tools. Bezel setting in itself, for the most part, involves a particular cut stone. It would be the cabochon cut, meaning it's got a flat bottom and then it's rounded at the top. You would need bezel wire, whatever your backing plate is. Normally something thinner is fine. And then whatever you're going to set the bezel on. So it would be whatever you're going to make a ring band out of, earring posts for earrings, hooks, like a pin back, a pendant veil, something like that. So we'd obviously need our soldering equipment, which would include the safety measures, your jeweler's saw, files, sandpaper, polishing stuff, etc., and so forth. All right. So we talked about before. I think the design starts with the stone. Generally, a lot of artists, and I happen to agree, will say they find the stone and they decide what the stone wants to be. And again, we're going to talk about just doing the bezel set with these cabochon stones. One thing to know about the cabochon cut is that it was the earliest way that people were able to shape a stone because they could make the flat bottom and the rounded surface. The faceted cut, which is like how a diamond is typically cut, came much later, where they were able to make those really precise angular cuts. So the bezel setting itself, that is the part that holds the stone, is one of the oldest methods of setting gemstones. All right. So as we learned previously in class, you would need to cut the appropriate length of bezel wire to the circumference of your stone. Now, the previous Edpuzzle video showed taking a little piece of sticky Post-it note, marking it from that. This photo right here shows somebody wrapping it around the stone and then marking a little blue line and cutting it just a little more than you need because it's always possible to take away. It's not so easy or actually impossible to put back. All right. Bezel wire actually comes in multiple lengths or heights. So if you were getting this on your own, you may end up with a taller piece of bezel wire and you may want to trim it. All right, so you could trim it with some snips or your saw. The other thing is you would need to make sure you file those edges completely flush so that when you shape this back into a circular form, these edges meet completely perfectly. There should be no light coming through. That's what we always do when we check for soldering, because as we know, solder will not fill gaps. All right. So just really quickly, we would use our piece of hard solder. I would have put this down on our soldering station, put the solder right underneath here, and I would have done this in circular motion, and we would watch that solder liquefy and come up, paying attention because that bezel wire is so thin and very easy to melt. Once it has been pickled and cleaned up, you would make sure the stone can be pushed through the top, and so that it forms really perfectly to the stone shape. All right. So next, what you'd want to do is smooth the bottom edges to make sure it's going to sit really nice on our backing plate, and then check the height of the bezel wire. I would probably go through and sand some of this down at an angle because this particular stone looks like it's higher in the back and lower here. So we don't want a unflattering fold that is going to take away from the front of the stone here. Okay. Next is making the back plate here. All right, so when we're making the back plate, You're going to trace your stone and make the piece of metal here. One of the other things that you can think about doing would be like this artist has a stamp with their name in it. You could stamp your initials in, or I like this design here where they used negative space and pierced out a little floral design here. If you have a really large stone, you could take even more out and save the extra. Like if you're using silver, save that extra silver for something else so you don't waste it. The other thing to consider is the iridescence or translucence of your stone. If it's a stone that lets light through, you definitely might want to consider opening the back, especially if it's something that would hang maybe off earrings because you would potentially get the light to come through. So things to consider. All right, so when we're soldering the back plate, it's a good idea um, to make sure again this fits completely flush. We're going to want to jump down to our medium solder. We're going to spread the solder chips around. All right, and this would have been fluxed and heated, and then the solder chips would come on. I showed you guys how to hold this straight down and circulate the torch around this back plate. Remember what we were watching for is that little flash that would come around here, a little flash. Okay. What I have also done and seen other artists do is some artists will actually heat from the bottom, and we have these at school, but not too many of them. And they will hold the torch upside down and heat upwards so that they're heating the back of this plate so that it's less likely to melt this bezel wire. Now, I don't know. I found both ways work fine. So again, it's a matter of preference. Okay. After it's soldered and pickled, you would remove any additional edging around the bezel. Depending on your design, is going to depend on how much plate you're going to leave on the outside of the bezel. And of course, we'd want to file and then sand the edge to make sure everything is nice and smooth. All right, a couple things that are not shown in the photos. I'm going to move this over here a little bit. We'd want to make sure we have a hole in the back plate. So if you did not pierce a design in the back plate, you'd want to put a hole in there so that you can pop the stone out if you need to. And then what do you do with the bezel cup? So from that point, you're going to decide, are you going to solder it to a ring that you've made? Are you going to attach posts for earrings? Is it going to go onto a bracelet, etc., and so forth? Okay. And then once it is indeed mounted to, for instance, a ring band, this is where we actually start securing the stone. So all of the heating has to be done when you put that stone in, right? So what they are using is, this is a burnisher. We also have a tool called a bezel rocker, but they're taking this like foil type edge and they're gently folding it over the stone. So generally I would start in a north, south, east, west motion. And then I would go from opposite corners and kind of work my way around the stone so that this just all starts to fold over and hugs the top. All right. It's pretty physical. So it takes some time, and you have to be careful with this tool because it's actually pointed and you can jab yourself. After it's done, what you want to do is burnish it, which basically you're polishing metal on metal. You're taking this little tool and you're circulating it around the surface so that it becomes nice and smooth and super shiny. And when you think you're done, you're actually going to do it some more. All right. Now, finishing. Depending on your desired results, you might want to use a patina like the liver of sulfur. And this ring band in this example has some texture hammered into it. So it's, I like the liver of sulfur. As you know, it's a little stinky, but it's a nice thing to use. The other thing you could do is a little bit of polishing on the buffing wheel, or actually the Fordhams are probably a better choice because you don't really want to hit this stone because you can wreck the finish of the stone. So anything you're going to do, you want to do it very carefully. Steel wool works. We actually have little brushes that work as well. So a couple different ways you can finish this without affecting the stone. Okay. Now, what you are going to do, we're going to kind of virtually pretend that we are going to be back in the studio, and some of you will be. I know it for sure. And you know what? Some of you might have the opportunity to take a class at college, or there's a lot of studios that you can still continue to take jewelry making just for your enjoyment or even a career. So maybe you'll come up with some good ideas that you'll have an opportunity to make in the future. So, what I'm going to ask you to do is come up with 3 different designs for 3 different types of jewelry. You're going to kind of virtually choose 3 different stones. I will attach some charts for you so you can look at the stones. You're going to decide 3 things that you want to make. You could do a pendant, ring, earrings, brooch, bracelet, whatever, as long as there are 3 kind of different things. And then what I kind of like to do is look at the stone, as I said earlier, and I kind of let the stone decide what it wants to be. Oh, this would be a cool ring, or these would be like nice earrings, etc. Because we're going to be working kind of virtually with photos, you can decide how big this stone would in reality be. What you want to do is do your best drawings. So I want you to make 3 really clean designs. For your drawings, you can use colored pencils, markers, or if some of you guys are really digital savvy, you can use your tablets to do this and do a digital design. So I want, though, it to be done with your hand. I don't want you to Photoshop in somebody's jewelry that they already made. So please don't do that, okay? What you are going to do is you're going to photograph what you have drawn. You're going to turn it into Schoology, and you'll see my example later on of how I want this turned in. And now we're going to talk about like what we should think about in coming up with our designs. Okay, so you're going to pick a stone. Again, decide what it is you want to make. All right, you're going to start sketching. And I'd like you to try to add a color component in here. All right, if you have a problem, please, you can contact me and I'll try to brainstorm with you. All right, so moving on. When you're doing your designs, I want you to think about the elements of art and design. We're going to focus on just 2 of them, but I will leave you some information on how to learn about more. So shape is the most basic when we're thinking about this. When we think about shapes, they come down into 2 categories, geometric and organic. So we are really familiar with geometric shapes. They are your most basic shapes: circles, triangles, rectangles, hexagons, squares, etc. They have very like clear-cut mathematical solutions to them. They have very controlled lines. These are like those man-made shapes, all right, that you would think about using in your geometry classes. Then we have organic shapes, which aren't so clear-cut or defined. So you have these kind of irregular organic shapes or ones that are naturally occurring in nature. All right. They're more fluid. They are spontaneous. You don't necessarily see a reason why. They aren't necessarily repetitive. All right. So we're going to think about those 2 shapes and how we could use that to enhance our designs. All right. So here's some examples. All right. So when you look at these 2 designs, are they geometric or are they organic? All right. So geometric or organic, geometric or organic. I think you can figure it out. All right. The next thing I want to talk to you about is line. All right. So when we're thinking about line, remember, what is line? Line is just a path for the eye to follow. Okay. It can be in lots of different directions. All right. Lines can be thick, they can be thin, they can be broken, they can be continuous. There is all sorts of different ways you can use line. So think back to elementary art or an art fundamentals class. You probably went over the elements and principles. Your basic lines are listed here: your vertical, horizontal, diagonal, and curved. So lots of ways you can use line to enhance your artwork. All right. So when we look at this piece, these are actually earrings, and I think they like hook around like this. And this is very curved line, but the use of it kind of brings out emotion when you look at it. Um, this makes me a little uncomfortable because of the curve in it. And there's also the shape in it and the use of negative space. And that's talking more elements of art that really give me this unsettled feeling. Now, you may also see like some organic features in here, but you could totally break this piece apart and talk about it just in the choices the artist made by using the different elements. All right. So over here in your lesson for the week, I have attached this website. This was done really well, explanation of the elements of arts and applying them to jewelry designs. So you can check that out. All right. And then lastly, this is my example of how I would like you to do your designs to turn into Schoology. Now, below here, I'm going to show you slides of lots of different stones you can use. And these are just the stones I picked out from my little charts that I found. And I decided to design around the stone. And this first one, I wanted to make a pendant because I thought it would be pretty to have a pendant. And I was like looking out the window and I see these little buds that are going to turn into leaves on the tree. And that makes me happy and think of spring and then summer. So I took this organic leaf shape, all right, and I decided to put my stone into it. I made a bail by taking this would be like a piece of little extra metal that would bend over the back where my chain could go through. And I wanted some texture on here. You can't see it really well in the drawing, the photo of the drawing, but there's like these little teeny granulars, which would be like little pieces of wire that you melt into balls that I was going to solder on to give it some very physical texture that would be lifted out of the piece. All right. My second design was just a really simple ring using just, this really simple blue onyx oval stone that was cabochon cut. And I just wanted it to be soft and curved and just simple. All right. So just really simple curved lines to make it soft and an easy ring to wear. All right. And then I did some earrings with this blue topaz. And I really kind of thought about, I wanted something long, and the blue topaz are very iridescent. So this would be pretty open in the back so light could come through it because they would drop down. So I used this kind of elongated triangle. So it's like geometric shapes inspired. And then I wanted physical texture to be stamped in using these like diagonal lines. All right. And so this is what I'd like you to do. Again, I'm going to give you this little template in Schoology. So you're going to cut and paste and you'll have to do some cropping of the stones. Okay. Underneath the stone, I want you to take a really clear picture of your drawing, crop it really nice and neat, and then put a little text box at the bottom of each to say, like, what is it? A pin, a pendant, a ring, whatever. And then I want you to talk about what inspired you. Do a little bit of research on those elements and principles. It's a quick read, and then think about really what is the idea behind this. Okay, now below here are some stone charts, and I have left these also in. There'll be separate files in Schoology, and then at the bottom there are some references. So I will leave this as a separate PDF for you to use. And then again, those little charts will be separate. Okay. So guys, I just wanted to say I miss you. And I hope you are doing well and being safe and making good decisions and being kind to your parents, because we as parents, we're a little bit stressed out too, and we are not perfect. So give your parents some grace and give yourself some grace that we are not perfect and this is a hard time. But anyway, I love all of you. I miss you, and I hope to see you soon. Mwah. Please contact me if you have questions, and I am more than happy to help you out.